So hello there, welcome to today's class. It's lovely to see all your lovely faces. Thank you for joining me. And if you've downloaded this video, then you will have received the notes, which look like this. So we're doing a chocolate cake today. Now, I did run this class this morning in my studio, and my beginner ladies struggled a little bit, but I think you guys will be fine because you're not beginners anymore. So yeah, they said they really struggled. So that was interesting. I thought it would be easier than they said it was. So we'll see how we go. So it's chocolate cake. We're going to do this class in two parts, as we always do. There's the charcoal section at the beginning, and then we'll get on to the pastels. So the charcoal is done on an art diary or a white drawing paper or something like that, just to sketch up the picture that we've got here on the notes. It's a focus on tone, so it's about looking at the black and white picture and studying the lights and the darks and the shapes. And it's also a good way to practice the drawing so that you become familiar with it. Today we're working in a square. So see how you go with ruling up a square on your page. So I'm just going to switch my screen over to my iPad so that you can see what I'm doing on my table. And there we are. Beautiful. All right. So this is where I'm working today. I've got my art diary here. So this is the book that I used to do my sketches in things in. And we'll get started with that using charcoal. Got a little box of charcoal here. I have all different sizes. I hardly ever use these big fatties because I usually don't work large. That'd be good for really big work if you're standing at an easel doing some life drawing or something. So this size is my favorite. That's a good length to draw with. And then I like to use a little short fat piece to do my shading. So that's my charcoal. It's willow charcoal. It's quite soft. So we'll rule up a square today. So this is the key. I was at an art group yesterday, and a lady had a square picture she wanted to paint. And she came to me, and I wasn't teaching, I was just a student, but she came to me and she said, should I do this portrait or landscape? And I said, probably square. And she said, why? I said, because it's square.
Well, I didn't notice straight away either.
No, and it's something that we don't actually think about. Because you pick a picture, you know, she had a picture out of a book that we had there, an art book, and she had that there and she wanted to paint the picture, and she said, you know, should I do it long ways or the other way? And I said, no, you have to do that square because it's a square picture. Oh, so I said, you know, if you try and do it landscape, it's going to be all elongated and out of shape, so it won't work. Oh, here's Susan. Lovely, she is coming. I'll just go back to my ladies for a moment and say hello to Susan. There she is. Hi, Susan.
Hey, how you going?
Good, thanks. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you.
That's good. You've decided to join us. I thought you might have wanted to do the video instead.
No, I want to join it. Just things have happened that I couldn't. So that's all right. I'm here today.
Excellent. All right. Well, we've already started.
Okay.
So, I'll just carry on if that's okay. You ready to go with your charcoal?
Yes, I can. Yep. You keep going and I'll get organised. So
okay. Excellent. All right. So yes, so don't ever try to put a square picture in a rectangle shape. It won't work. You've either got to crop your picture to fit to the size you want to do, or work out what the dimensions are. So we're working in a square today, and just make sure you do that because we don't want to end up making it the wrong shape. We're also going to work with a grid. So we're going to rule the page, square up into quarters. So I've done mine 17 by 17. So half of 17 is 8.5. So I'll find my little point mark there, 8.5, and I'll be good today. I won't do it freehand. I'll do it properly. Rule it up with my ruler. Usually I do this freehand and just hope for the best. Because this is the first part of the class, and I do like to be a little bit more relaxed about it. Okay, so there's our square area, and it is divided into 4 sections. So if you look at your picture on your notes, you can see that I've put a crosshairs or a grid line on there. Grid line is the way that we like to draw in my classes. I find it quite useful because it helps me put everything where it needs to be. And then I can kind of measure and relate things in relation to where the lines are. So it really helps you to do a drawing if you're not that good at it. And I'm not that good at it. Drawing is not my thing. I'm better at filling it all in. So that's why I like the grid effect. So what we're going to do is we'll start up in the top left corner, and we're going to just look at the outlines that we're going to draw for now. So we're going to look at the area up here in the top left corner. So you can see, we can see the background behind the cherries on the cake. So if you look at that background shape and not the cherries, because it can get confusing if you've got a lot of different things in there that you're trying to work out. But if we just look up here at this shape of the background, ignore the little stem, that'll be easier to draw in than all this cherry business. We'll get back to that later. So we'll start here, and we're looking at where the side of the picture intersects with the edge, and it comes in, that's a little cherry stalk there, but it comes in at about probably, is that a third? Maybe a third of the way down, or a little bit more than that. So I'm going to say it's about here. So I just like to mark my intersection spots. It's about there. And then this top section intersects probably about halfway across inside the grid, slightly to the right of halfway. So if that's halfway, I'm going to say it's about there. So marking those spots. And then we've just got to look at this interesting little shape of that background area. So the negative space around the cherries. We're looking at that shape there. So let's see how we go drawing that in. Start up here, we're at the top where we come off the page. We do a little round edge, then we come across, then we come up and around. Oops, need to go across more, around there, and then out like that. So where is my eraser? I need to go grab that one moment. So what we've tried to create here is this little shape that we can see in the negative space. I'm just going to change that slightly because it needs to come up here and then around and then off like that. So that's that negative space shape in the background that we can see. And that's all we need to do in that section for now. Then we can move over to the other side, and we can have a look at where this shape, see, again, we've got negative space, and we've got quite a lot of background in this top right-hand corner. So we can see that we come in about here on the halfway mark, just to the right of it, about there. We come out in a little round shape. Just ignore the stems, don't put those in just yet because they'll confuse you. And we do these little bubbly shapes. We've got three round bubbly shapes there. Then it comes out a little bit wider and has a round shape, comes in and then out again. And it comes out to about there. Okay, so we're just looking at all these different shapes and drawing the negative space. So that's the space around the cake. So now if I look at where this part of the icing comes to, just this section here, I'm looking for points within this shape that I can relate to and mark in where they sit inside my square. So if I go from here to here, I can say, well, that sits at about there. So I can join the dots there to there. Then this one comes out not quite as far as that. So it comes up and it's about halfway up. So it comes up to about there, like that. That's the icing. And then we've got three little bumps up to the top. Okay, so that comes up to there and then across a little bit. The three little bumps begin here and they come in, they start in just short of halfway. So I'm going to say it's about there. And then we can come like this. One bump, two bumps, three bumps. And that's our negative space. So I hope that sort of made sense. I just find it a lot easier to look at the space around something sometimes when you're trying to do a drawing, because then you change your brain. You're not looking at a cherry and a cake. You're looking at line and shape, and it just makes it much easier. Okay, So we've done that section and this section. Now we can move down into the bottom right-hand corner. And we can see this shape comes around and then it goes down there. Okay, we'll just ignore the edge. That's a plate there, but we'll just ignore that for a minute. We're just drawing that line of the cake. So it's got an interesting shape. It comes around and then it comes off the page down here at about that far out. Okay, so we're going to draw that shape. We're going to come around like that and then down and then down. So it's not quite as pronounced as those shapes, but it's sort of like that. It has this little curve to it because we've got 1, 2, 3 layers of cake here. So there are 3 layers, the edges of those layers. Then we've got our plate here on this side. So we can see the plate, the top of the plate comes just beyond about halfway. So it's about there. And it comes down to about there. And then we've got the next part, which comes down and it comes all the way down to the corner of our page. So down into there. Okay, so that's the edge of the plate in there. And I'll just rub this bit out. So I'm going to make sure I get my line in the right spot. Okay, so that's that side. Then we can come across to the other side. So I'm going to work with this a little bit more. And on that side, there are no edges, right? Because that cake comes off the bottom and the side edge. It bleeds off the page. There's no edges, no hard edges there, no outside lines. So our background is basically up here in this top left corner and down here on the right side. And then we go into the plate. So now we've got that much info in there, we can start to mark in different parts of the cake. So if we start at the bottom, which is what we're going to do when we do it in pastel, and look at where it starts down here. So we've got this little triangle here of cake at the bottom. So I'll put that in. We've already got the edge of it, so I'm just going to continue that line down through there. I think I'm about to sneeze. One moment while I mute and do that. Sorry about that. Okay, so we've got the edge, we've got that little bit of cake there. So you can see there's a slice of cake down there at the bottom. And then we've got this line that comes down and across through there. So that's the middle layer of the cake. So let's look at this line here. This comes from the top line of the cake all the way across. We're going to ignore the cream for a minute. Bring that line all the way through and it comes over to here, about there. And how low does it go from the halfway line? It's probably about there. And it dips down a little bit, so there's a slight curve in it. So if we grab from here and draw a line across like this, and then curving around and up. So that is the edge of this top layer of cake. Okay. Then underneath that, before we move up further, we've got the cream in here. So that's cream sits down in the bottom left section. And then it sits on top of this slice of cake here. So if we come over to about, where does the cream begin? About here. And then we go down, and then we come down, and then we come down to the bottom of the page. So it goes down to about there. So this section is the cream. That's that light or white area through there, on top of that piece of cake through there. Okay. Now we're moving back up into this one again, just for a moment. Let's look at this piece of cake. So what we've got here is an edge and a top. So we have a side of the cake. It's a slab and there's a side on it. So we need to put the side on too. So bring that across. Where does the side finish? At about here. Hard to see because it's so dark, but we need to bring in the side of the cake like that. That's going to tell us, when we put the tones in, it's going to tell us that this section here is darker because it's the side, and then on the top of that is lighter. It's the lighter cake above it. Cool. So that's that bit of cake. So we've got 1, 2, 3 layers of cake in there. Next, we've got to put the icing in so we can see where the icing sits. And if we start in this quarter, we'll come back up and do the top part afterwards. Start about there. That's where it seems to intersect our line. And then it intersects down here at about there. So now we can draw our shape of our icing in through there. And you can tell that it's not a straight line, okay? It's got a lovely curve through it. So I'll just put that lovely curve in through there like that. That's a nice little crease, nice little mark inside the icing. And then we can continue that line around and just keep coming around like this to the other side. So we've got the edge of our icing marked in there. And then we can come up and we can join, see this outline edge up here in the top right quarter. That section there is the icing area. So we can come down and we can join that through here. Okay, so that sort of joins up to that part there, and that's the icing. Lovely. So now we've got cake, cream, cake, cake, icing. Oh, cake, cake, cream, cake, cake, icing. Awesome. So that's the icing. It's all this section here. It takes up quite a lot of room when you look at the picture inside this bottom left quarter. It's half of it pretty much. So that's that section there. And then a lot of this bottom right quarter as well. As we move up and look at where the cherries sit, we can see that they sit mostly in the top left and then a few in the top right at the very top there. So we've got a lot of icing in this section here, not as much in this section. This is more cherries. So let's have a look at where the cherries are. Let's start with this front guy here. It's quite big and it sits down quite low actually. It sits about here. The bottom of the cherry comes to about there and it sits right on that middle line there, doesn't it? So we can kind of draw it in and put it in. How tall is it? It comes up to probably about there. So that's about right to there. And we can draw the cherry in like that. So that's that cherry. Then we can start to draw cherries in around it. You've got to make sure that there are no gaps between the cherries, okay? So there's no spaces between them. They're all clustered in there together. So we've got to make sure we keep them all together. Okay, so up the top here, there are 2. You can barely see the difference between the 2. There's a lot of lost edges and dark shapes through here. But we can see there's 2, and we can come down and we've got one there in the background, and then this one sits in front of it. And it sits at about here, comes down about that low. So it's quite big, that one. And that one there behind, you can't see the rest of it because it's got another cherry down here. So this one's quite large. And then we've got that one behind. Then we've got another one here. So we've just got to be careful about where we put these cherries, okay? Because they've all got to kind of cluster in together without leaving gaps around them. That cherry sits there, and that's the one with the lovely shine, and we can see where the stem used to be in there. Okay, so that's that one there. Then over onto the left side, there's another little cherry. Well, there's a couple up the back, so we should do them first. So do this one first, and then another one behind it there. So it's a lovely cluster of cherries up here. And that comes around like that. And then we've got this little cherry here. That's a bit smaller. It comes down about that low there. It's got its stem that goes off over there. So we have 1, 2 at the back, and then we have a couple hidden underneath there that we can't really see. We know they're there because there's stems. There's a stem there and there's a stem there. But the main things we can see is this one here on the left, far behind, and then there's one here in front of it. We've got that lovely big one in the middle. It's got that beautiful shine on it around the the stem was. And then we've got this nice big chunky one here as well. So that's that little cluster of cherries on that side. Then we're moving over into the right-hand side now. So we're doing the cherries in there. And you can see there's the edge of this one, which we've got in already. Then we've got two here. So we can put one there, and this one probably sits in front of it. A bit hard to tell. And this one is sinking down inside the icing. So it's got a sort of a hard line at the bottom of it there. And then this one, we've got one here that's also sinking down into the icing, and it comes across and sits in here. So it's got icing in front of it there, and just rub out that mark. And then it has that lovely, beautiful shine and the little dip where the stem comes from. And the stem comes up like that. And there's another little stem over there. Probably not in that cherry, it's behind it. So that's pretty much our cake drawing. So they're the outlines. That's telling us where everything sits. And we can put some sticks in there. And we can then look at the tone. So now we've got everything in place. We used the grid method to draw that up, to measure in where things sit in relation to the grid line and edges and things. Then we can come over to the black and white picture and really have a look at the tones in there. So if you have it up on your screen, I always try to have it on my screen as well as printed like this, but it really helps to see it in tone, and that's what we need to focus on for now, and then we can convert tone into colour. All right, so you can see in the picture that we're going to start down here at the base again. Let's start with the edge of the plate. So the edge of the plate is dark, so if we darken that off like this with charcoal, or is that pastel? Done it again. I think it was pastel with charcoal. That's better. Darken that off in there. So that's the edge of our plate, which in colour is blue. This here, it looks quite dark because it's a dark blue. Then inside the plate, you know, that white section of the plate, it's actually not white, it's in shadow. So we're going to just shadow that off a little bit. Put a little bit of charcoal through there and just put some shadow in, and then blend it with your fingers. And that'll create a lovely little shadow area to put your plate into. And as it comes forward down here, it's a little bit lighter, just through there. Cool. So that's our plate. Then we can come across and we can start on the cake. So we've got one layer of cake down here. Remember that little triangle we did? Now this cake, each slice of cake has an edge and a top, and the edges are darker. So we're just going to put a little bit of a darker stripe or line there on the right-hand side, and then we're just going to put a mid-tone in here. If you look at your black and white picture, you can see there's a slight change in tone just in that little piece of cake. It's a little bit darker on the side or the edge, and then it comes in and lightens up slightly on the top because it's catching the light. The light's coming from the right, so all the light's coming this way, and that's why it's catching the light on the right side of everything, and the left side is quite dark. It's very dark, this picture. So that's a bit of cake there. Next, we've got this bit of cake, and it's the same thing. It comes down here, so it's got a mid-tone shade. It's darker than the plate, so make sure you make that darker than the plate. And it's also darker down through here on the side of the piece of cake. So you can see it's darker through there, and the darkness of it tapers off up to the edge here. So that's our second layer of cake. Just going to soften that off with my fingers, blur it off a little bit. Okay. So what we're trying to do is put shadow on the bottom or the right side here and then softly bring that up so that it starts to look like it's got form, like it's got an edge or a side. So using tone is all about creating form, isn't it? Without tone, we've got no form or shape. Okay, next we've got the cream, and the cream is in this black and white version quite light. So let's leave that fairly white. You can shade a couple of spots. You can see as it moves around to the left, it gets slightly darker. So it's got a more shadow around on the left side. So you can darken that off a little bit with some charcoal and just smudge it with your fingers a tad. And just softly, softly. So we don't want to make that too dark because we want to keep that fairly light. But underneath the cream, it has shadow. So can you see there's shadow sort of down in here underneath the cream? Because it's sitting on top of this bit of cake, it's casting a little shadow down through there. So we need to get some of that in there to make it look like it's 3D. Okay, and then I'm just going to softly dab it off a little bit because I don't want it to be a hard line. I want it to be a soft shadow. So just softly, softly blur that off a tad so that it's a little bit darker than the cake and it looks like it's sitting on the top. And it doesn't really, but anyway. And I can just lighten up some of the very light spots with my eraser to get a bit more light back in there. But you can see there are some creases and shapes and things in the cake. So, you know, we've got a little bit of a crease through there. There's a bump running through there. So very subtle shadows that give us the feeling of that thick, lush cream that's sitting in the cake. Cool. Okay. So that's the cream, and we've got to remember about that when we do it in pastel, about the shadow underneath it and making it darker as it comes around to the left side because there's no light over there. Coolio. Next, we can move up into the last slice of cake. So remember, we did two parts for that one. We did the darkest part and then the lightest part. So this is one piece of cake or one slice, but what it has is a dark edge. So we can darken off this edge, right? Make it nice and dark. Keep some texture in there from your paper if you want to, because it'll make it look more cakey. Notice that it gets much darker around on the left side. So everything on that side's quite dark. Got a lot of dark to be afraid of today. And just soften the edges off a little bit. We don't want really hard edges here. The cake is crumbly and it's got little pieces of cake sort of hanging over the edges. So we want to keep that sort of not a really hard line. Keep it soft, which is pretty easy to do with pastels. No hard lines. Okay, so that is the side of the cake. Then we've got to do the top. And you can see on the right-hand side, we've got a lot of light in there. So I don't want to do too much in there. I'm just going to put some light charcoal around this side and then get it a little bit darker as I come around, because you literally can't really see between the side and the top of that bit of cake around there because it's so dark. And then as we come around to the right, it gets lighter. I also want to soften off the edges between the light and the dark a little bit, just to make it look a bit more natural, so it hasn't got any hard edges in there. Okay, so that's that part of the cake. You can push some of that in if you want to. Like that. And then right on the very edge, we've got it quite light and bright in there. So I'm going to leave that for now undone. Okay, so I'm going to keep that nice and white, and I can just sort of do a bit of dabbing with my eraser as I come around this side here to just get some more light back in there in little random spots, you know, just the bits of the cake that might be poking up slightly, catching a bit of light as we come around the corner here. Like that. Cool. All right. So now we're moving up into the icing. So can you see why we're doing it this way? It's just so that everything underneath gets done first, and then we can keep moving up from the bottom to the top. Just seems to make more sense to me anyway for layering, etc. Okay, so we've got icing, and we've got lots of light in the icing as well. So let's try really hard not to fill in the light bits. And if you do, it's okay. You can take it out with your eraser. It just makes it easier if you don't have to. So let's have a look at the light bits and the shapes of those first off. Over here, we have a triangle kind of bit of light there. Up here, there's a bit of light sort of in that section there, a little bit of a dotty light area. So I need to take some of that out. And then we've got what's happening here is that's that curve there. So there's light. That needs to be a bigger curve now. Now I'm looking at it. There's a light section here, sort of across there like that. So that's a little light area in that shape there. That's that curly bit that comes up through here. And then we have almost a rectangle of light that comes across like this through there. Now, none of these pieces of light have hard lines except for this very edge bit that goes there like that. So that's the light areas that we've kind of marked out. So see if you can sort of blur and smudge around them as much as you can. Trying to keep an eye on how light the icing is and where it's light. So just noticing that and trying to focus on the light and the dark. And look at your black and white picture, because that's going to help you find all the darks and the lights. On the bottom of this triangle here, we have a dark area as it sort of curls up from the side and catches the light at the top. Inside it, down through here, there's a little crease, so we can mark that in too. And then the icing edges around this way are quite dark because they've got shadow on them. I'm using my little bit of charcoal just on its side, and I'm just rubbing it up and down like this to just create a soft sort of edge for the icing if I can. There's also shadow under those bits of icing too as they come around into this darker area. So there's quite a lot of dark through there. And then there's a crease there, and there's another little crease there, and a little bit of light on that one. And then there's another little kind of crease there. Sort of this lovely swirly, chocolatey shapes. Nice, aren't they? So you can mark all those little shapes in, and then we can just shade it in softly, softly. Okay, so I'm just trying to shade in around where the lights are. This big rectangular shape of light looks like it's kind of a fold over the icing. This beautiful kind of round effect there. And light over there. So it's all about contours and shapes, isn't it? So if we study this now, then we'll get it pretty good in the next step with the pastels. Really cool. Lovely. And I'm just going to put all my charcoal down now. Just going to smush it in. Nice and dark up through there. And make it dark where it's darkest. So I'm just going to blend it with my fingers now to try and make it a bit smoother, because the icing is a different texture to the cake. The cake's sort of bumpy and rough, isn't it? It's got lots of lovely texture, whereas the icing is a bit smoother. So I'm going to try and keep that smoothness, the feeling of it anyway, going through there. That's it. So that's our light areas that we've kind of left undone. It's hard to leave undone, isn't it? I always get my fingers into it and muck it up. And then I've got to get him back in with the eraser and try to get the light back in. But that's starting to look something like texture now, which is what we want. Good. Okay. So we'll move on to the cherries next, because I don't want to spend all the class time in the charcoal section. It's just a great way to rehearse and get to know the picture, become familiar with it. So that's our icing. It is much darker up in here, so I can darken that off. Over there into the light. So darker over that side on everything pretty much. And then as we move up here into the cherries, we can start with the back ones first. So if we mark in the darkest parts of the cherries, right? So I've just used the edge of my charcoal and I've marked that in there nice and dark. And then dark over on this guy. So you can see this one here has a lovely shine on that top right shoulder. So we'll try to leave the shoulder empty if we can to catch the light. It's that one. And we're going to do this in order from back to front if we can, because that's the way I like to work with pastels. So we'll do this little back guy back here. There's a couple of other bumpy bits back there that look like vague cherry shapes. Then we've got this big, beautiful round one here on the left, back left, and it's got a lovely little bit of light on it too. So that's just catching the light there on that top right corner. So darkening off around that. And then we've got this little fella in front of him. So he's very dark on the left side, kind of disappears into the picture. Can't see the edges. And under here on the bottom right is quite dark as well. And then it's more mid-tones, and it's got this lovely little white shine just there on the right side. So they're all getting a little bit mixed up with the darks, aren't they? And that's okay, because I think what's nice about this picture is that we've got lots of lost edges. There's a lot of dark in there, but there's a lot of edges that get a bit lost and disappear. And that's kind of fun to do in your art. So now we've got those top ones and the left ones in. We can move over now to the right side, and we can just darken off where we can see some dark sections in there. So there's that back plum on the cherry on the right has a little dark patch, and then it's got a light shine on it too. It's like a triangle shape in there. There's another little one hiding down there underneath the others. It's a red colour with a little white shine on it too. I think I'm losing my voice, been talking too much. Just a little bit of shine, put that back in there. And then we've got this guy far right. So again, he's got dark on the left side, and then it gets lighter as it comes out onto the right, and got that lovely little white shine on that guy. So they've all got a nice little shine on them, haven't they? And this is what's going to be the highlight at the end, is the shiny bits on the cherries and the cake. That's what's going to make it. All right. So that one is sort of sinking down into the icing. We can leave him sinking into there. Then we can come forward to this one here. So it's not as dark as it is, kind of disappears like the others do into this left side. Darken all that off. And it's also lying down inside the icing. So just lying down there, got a little dark section inside it there where the stalk's coming through. And a little bit of light around it as well. So that's a nice one. And pop a bit more light back in there. Use your eraser to get your light in if you lose your light. Bit of light there. And this guy has a little stem, so we can put that in too. It comes up through there. That. And the stems all have a light and a dark side as well. So if you make it a little bit thicker, then maybe we can get the eraser, shape it into a knife blade edge, but make sure it's fairly firm, not too fine and floppy. And then just pull that down through there to try and get some light on the side of the stem. I don't know if that'll work or not, but it's worth a try. Got a little bit in there. It's a bit too wide, so I'll just push a bit back. That just helps the stem to stand out a bit more. All right, so we're moving around our cherries. Let's get into this big fat guy in the middle now. So he's sitting in amongst all of them, and he's a bit lighter on the top than the guy behind him, so that means I need to darken that one off behind. So it's all about the lights and the darks, and then it's dark down through here on the left side and around underneath, dark through there, and then it's sort of mid-tone around that area there. And then we've got the little middle bit where the stem used to be in there, and it's sort of coloured in the middle of that, and then it's got a white shine on it, a white shine around here. So I'm just marking that back in, see if I can make it work. And darken off in there a bit more. Something like that. He doesn't have a stem. It must have got lost somewhere along the way. If you want to put one in, feel free. Okay, and then we'll finish off with this little one in the front here. So he's lovely. He's got a nice shape, sort of real typical cherry shape that we can see. And it's got sort of an apple almost shape on the left, and it gets lost in the dark down through there. So everything's lost in the dark through there. Coming around, and it's darker on the left, and then as we come around to the right, we get a little bit lighter in tone. And then we've got a beautiful shine there as well. So I'm just going to blend that in softly, softly. And then get my white back in. I didn't leave that white bit undone. And then we can put this stem on. So he goes up through there like that. And again, if you want to, you can try and get a bit of light into that stem. See how you go. Just depends on how much of edge you can get onto your eraser. And then run it down the side. So the light's always on the right in this picture. So let's see if we can get a bit of light down on there. Yeah, that worked. Cool. So that's our cherry cake. So that was just a study of the tones. It just helps us to understand the picture, become familiar with it. And now we can move on and do it in colour, which is going to be fun and exciting. I did it this morning and I didn't like my browns. The brown is such a difficult colour to find a nice brown. So I probably should go and have a look for some different browns. Anyway, I'll stop fiddling here. I just want to keep darkening and lightening things. That's our cake. Beautiful. All right. Now what I'm going to do is put my colours that I've picked for the picture here on the page so that you can see what colours I've got for today. In this picture, I can see a lot of red. There's a lot of red and a lot of purple. So I've picked out this yummy magenta kind of colour. And I've also got a lovely pink. So that's really nice too. There's a little bit of pink highlight through the cherries there. So I really liked that. So they're sort of my cherry colours. My darkest dark is blue violet. So that's this one. If you don't have that, then a black or even a really dark blue or a very dark purple will be nice. What else did I have in there? couple of whites. I picked up a pearl white and then it wouldn't work for me. So I'm not sure which one's the pearl. That one. Yeah, put that away. I'm not using you. There's a pale blue, which doesn't look blue anymore because it's covered in browns, but there's a lovely pale blue there, which I'm going to use for the lights and then put white over the top if it's not light enough. And I've got white, but I won't put that there because you can't see it. I've got some purple and I've got some blue for the plate. There's a couple of blues. I've got this one and this one. It's a darker blue. It's a little bit hard. Dark blue is nice in the cake as well. Blue and brown are really lovely complementary colours, so that could be lovely down in the darks. And then my browns. Just going to see if I can get a better brown. These browns are quite earthy. That one's nice for the chocolate, maybe. And I had this brown, but it's no. And a bit of orange was nice too in the chocolate cake. I'm just going to go and check my other browns and see what I can find. Okay, I've found this one, which is just, yeah, a little bit darker than what I had this morning, so that might be nice. I've got that one, and then that's my blue violet brown. Oh, and I've got a creamy colour for my icing. So something like that with a bit of yellow in it, I think, a bit more warmer, and then a green for the stems. So they're my colours for today. And of course, if you feel like you want to pick up any more, you can. But it's just good to start with a base palette first and then see how you go. So I've got to get rid of some of these browns because there's a couple there that I haven't put on my colour chart. Maybe I'll hang on to that one as well, just in case. Because we've got quite a lot of different brown tones in there. So there's very dark, then we've got lights and mids, etc. And I can see a bit of orange as well as purples and pinks. So that was why I've got the orange there and the pinks and things. So I think that'll be quite nice. So I'm going to leave you with that to set yourself up for 5 minutes. And I'll come back and then we'll start drawing it up. What I've got today is a dark blue paper. So I thought that would look nice with a brown cake. Blue and brown are nice. We won't worry about filling in the background. So you choose a paper that you like that will work with your cake, that you won't have to do the background in. Okay, and we'll just leave it there on the paper color. So whatever you prefer. I like something a bit darker because it's such a dark picture and complementary. So the blue's quite nice with that. So I'll leave you here for now and we'll come back in 5. So it's 1:46 now. So I'll see you at about just after 10 to. Won't be long. Okay, let's get going. So we've got our colours, got our paper, and I'm just going to get my paper onto my board now. I'm going to charcoal away. So remember, we're working in a square, so you want to mark off a square on your sheet of paper. Which way will I go? This way? This way. What I'm doing is taping down the corners just so I can keep it still on the board and not have to hold it down. So it's just a nice way to keep the paper nice and still. And if I just put a little bit on each corner, it's easy to come off afterwards. Be careful you don't rip your paper when you do that. All right, marking off a square. So I'm going to need a white or light coloured pencil for this. Sorry about that. I have to go find one. Okay, so if this is 23 high, then I'm going to make my painting 23 square, and I'm going to leave the left side free to use to mix colours and just put things down if I need to. So that's going to be my area for the painting today. And then we can mark our grid in. So 11.5 and 11.5. Bring that line down through there and then coming across ways. Same thing, 11.5, 11.5. Looks like that. Okay. So it's good to have a bit of a working space if you can when you are doing your paintings. So if something is a square and you're painting, your paper isn't, then you can always use this extra bit of paper over here to, you know, mix colours and see what you want to make. All right. So now I'm going to grab my notes again and refer back to my image and draw this in again. So we're going to do the same process that we just did earlier with the charcoal. I'm going to work out where things intersect and where they, the shapes of the negative space, etc. So again, working in quarters. So if I start up here in this quarter, I can come down and around, and there's a little bump through there, There's another little bump around about there. So something like that. That's roughly the right shape that I want to get into that quarter. And to do that, I was looking at the negative space. So that's the shape up here in the top right quarter of the background. Okay, so that's that area. So then move over into the other side, and I can do the same thing over there. I can draw my shapes in again, just like we did before. So this one starts at about the middle line. It comes down, and then we have these 3 bumps. Remember the 3 bumps? And then we come across like this, and we've got another bump that comes around like that, and then another bump that goes like that. Okay, so that's again the negative space or the negative shapes that we can see through there. This is a bit messier, and there, and then that's the icing, obviously, that goes down through there. But this is the side of the cake that comes in here. That's that little triangle of cake there. Then we can come down and do the same thing on this side. So just finding the edge of the cake this time. Where does it intersect on our page? About there. So around like that, and then down, and then should have gone lower, sorry. This is why we practice. Down to about there, so that's got to come down to there, and this one comes down to there, and that little triangle one should be about there, so that's got to come over there. So it's good when you've got all these reference points and you've done it before and you think, yep, no, that's not right. So now I know that's got to come there like that. So just getting your drawing and your shapes right is really important before you do anything else, because if your drawing's not right, nothing's going to be right. Now we've got to look at the plate. So the plate, the edge of the plate starts at about here. And see the shape of that? It comes out to there like that. So that's the edge. And then we've got the blue band that starts here and it goes all the way down into this corner. So we're going to come down like that. So that's our plate. And then remember, on this side, there is no background area, so there's no outlines to do. So let's now draw in all the parts. First off, we've got this small section of cake down here at the bottom. So we've got that in and we've got our plate in. Then we can come up to here and we can continue the edge of the cake around across here and over to the other side. So let's have a look at where it comes out of the other side. It's about there. Where does it intersect our center line? It's about there. So that's fairly deep, isn't it, to be coming down through there. So the cake comes down through here and around like that, roughly. And then we've got our cream. So the cream sits between these two here. So the cream starts up in here, comes down like this. It's got a little wiggly shape. Again, looking at the negative space or the shape of the cream, comes down to there. So this area here is all the cream. It's got a little bump there. Whether you put that in or not, it's up to you. Back up to the next level of cake. So you can see, remember we talked about the side and the top of the cake. So this one has a side and a very obvious top. So the side is darker and it tapers off into a point at about here. So it comes around, and it's about that tall there. And over here, it's about that tall. So then we can join those lines and get the side of the cake in there. Okay. So that's the side, that's the dark side. And then it'll gently go up into the top of the cake, which is a lighter tone. So that comes up through there. So now we can come back up to the top here and look at this icing shape. So it comes down through there. And the halfway line has a little dip and out and then around through here and up through here and across. So that's our icing shape. So when I take that away, I can see this is my icing, that's cake, that's the edge of the cake, that's cream, that's cake, and that's cake. Okay, this bit of cake looks too big to me. Anyway, maybe that one needs to come down a bit lower. Okay, now we've got the icing edges in, so we need to figure out where the strawberries are. All right, so we'll start at the back with the strawberries. Remember, we always start at the back to get the things that are behind things done first. So much like we did in the charcoal process, we'll start at the back and we'll come forward. So we've got a lovely big cherry here. Nice big cherry there. Remember that big round one? And he's got a big dark one that sits up there behind him. Then there's a little bit of a cherry showing through here. On the side, we have two cherries, so they sit like this. And this one sinks down into the icing, so it's got an almost horizontal edge on it. And that one is dark, and he sits down in there. And then this guy sits in front. So we've just got to get all our cherries into the right place. Like that. That one must come down lower. And across through there. And again, this guy is sitting down inside the icing. So he's sunken down when he was put there. So that's that guy. And then back over here, we've got some bumps in the background that are just little cherries. Off in the distance, we can't really see the detail because it's so dark. But maybe that's one there. And we've got this one here on the side. He needs to come down lower. Let me see. This, let's go to this big guy because he sits down this low. And that was the mistake we made this morning when we did this class, was a lot of people had their cherries up too high and they didn't make them big enough. So if we can make them nice and big, then that's going to work out. Otherwise we'll have gaps between the cherries, and that's what happened this morning too. People had spaces between them. when there aren't any. Not that we can see anyway, because it's so dark. So we need to keep it quite dark. And that guy sits there like that. His little stem comes out through here. Okay, so we've got a nice arrangement of cherries there. Some are so dark they get lost in the background, and others we can see because they've got some light colour coming through. Beautiful. So that's our basic drawing pretty much done now. So I don't want to rush you. If you're still drawing, just carry on and I'll wait a couple more minutes. Just noticing too where the light is on these guys. If you want to mark in the light sections on your cherries, that'll help us when we get to that bit later. They'll be the last things we do, the cherries. We're going to start at the bottom and work our way up. So just noticing the light and knowing that the light's coming from the right-hand side. So everything on the left is dark. Each cherry that we can see has a lovely little shine on it. So it's good to note where the shine is. There's also shine on the icing, so that's another good thing to note too, is where is the shine on the icing. And you can mark in some of those spots as well if you want to. It's a good exercise to do because then you kind of work out, oh, that should be there, not there. Lovely. And got all those beautiful creases in the icing too, which is fun. All right. So let's begin. We're going to start, like I said, at the bottom. I'm not going to worry too much about filling in the background. If you want to do that, that's fine, but mine's going to stay blue. And there is a bit of a wall or something in the picture that comes to about the halfway line. If you want to put that in, you can. You don't have to. Again, I'm just going to leave it undone. So while I've got my rubber eraser in my hand, I'm just going to take that halfway line out that's over there because I don't really need it. And I can pop it back into the margins in case I lose them as we go. Okay, cool. So we'll start with the plate. The plate is probably white, but in this instance, we might use pale blue. So if you get your pale blue pastel, and we're going to fill in that white part of the plate with the blue. Now, the reason I'm doing blue is because the white will be too bright, I think. It's just going to be too bright against everything else. And it's actually not one of the highlight areas of the picture. So I don't want to draw attention to it so much. We want to save our whites for the lightest parts. So I know that looks white on there, but it's actually very light blue. I'm going to push it in with my finger. This is Colour Fix paper, so it's got a nice bit of grit. Oh, actually a smooth piece. It's a smooth piece of Colour Fix, no grit. So in case you didn't know, Colour Fix do a lovely smooth paper now. Don't think it's quite as good as Pastel Matte, but it's not too bad. Not too bad. I'm not in love with it, to be honest. But anyway. Okay, so that's the white part of the plate. Now if you grab your blue and do the edge, so we're just going to do the trim or the blue border of the plate. And while you're there, so do all that section there. It might happen naturally anyway if you get blue on your fingers. Fill that in with your darker blue. Grab your finger and then pull it in, push it in, pull it around a little bit like that. So it's nice and smooth because the plate's a smooth object. And then as you pull that around, just pull some of that dark blue down into this plate section, just at the top of that light area there, to create a little bit of shadow. Might not be enough. If it isn't, then you might want to add, I think I'm going to add a bit of blue violet, just a teeny weeny bit to get a bit more shadow through there. That's a bit better. So a little touch of blue violet, then I'm going to come back over this with my darker blue again and just freshen up that colour because it went a bit milky when I got the white or the pale blue into it. Okay, and then I can again pull that around like that and just soften off the edge a little bit. It's off in the distance. We don't want to make it a feature. We'll blur it off a little bit. It has a nice, a very slight shine on the rim. So I've got this lighter blue. So I'm just going to run along the rim of the plate there and softly push that in as well, just to give it a little bit of 3D. So you can see in the picture there's a slight bit of a light just on the edge, and that'll be the light on the right side that's catching the top of the dish or the plate. Alrighty, now just want to darken that off a tad more up in this bit here. We're going to have a lot of darks going on today, so don't be afraid of the dark. And once we've got that plate section in, then we can start on the cake. So we've got a little triangle of cake down here. I'm going to put that in here so that make sure you kind of pull some of that plate under the cake so we don't have a gap between the two. A little bit of brown in there. Push that in with your finger. Overlap the edges to the next layer a little bit just so that you don't have any gaps again. Now, if you look very closely at that tiny triangle of cake, it's a bit darker on the edge, isn't it? So I'm just using my, what am I using? Blue violet, I think, to darken that off a little bit down through there. And then I'm just going to pull it up because what's happening is the cake is dark, but where it's folding up sort of on the edge of the cake, it's got a bit of light and it's catching the light. So it's slightly lighter. Just, I'm going to show you with my orange just through there. There's a little bit of a shine through there. I know that's too bright, but I'm going to push it in a minute. So your orange will be nice to catch those little bits of lighter bits of cake. So I'm just going to softly push that in. I'm not pressing very hard because what I'm trying to do is retain some of the texture on the cake. So I think that's probably enough for that little piece there. But that'll be the kind of process we're going to use on each part of the cake because they all have a dark edge and a light edge. And we've got to try and convey the feeling of that through our drawing. So we'll move up into the next piece of cake. That's the next layer. Remember, it starts up here, taller than the dish, and then it comes down like this, and it sits on top of that piece we just made. So that's the kind of shape that we've got going on there. Put all your brown in there, so just fill that in with your brown, your nice chocolate cake brown. Get some pastel on the paper, so then we've got something to work with. Okay, so pushing that in. Before I do push it in, I'm going to put a bit of dark just on the bottom edge of it because it's a bit of dark through here. See how now the dark of this layer on top of that lighter section on the bottom layer just makes it stand out and it looks like it's layered now. It's starting to look layered. That's what we're trying to achieve with the lights and the darks. So I've got that there. And then I'm going to add a bit of orange into this edge here. This is the edge that kind of curls over before it goes flat and the cream sits on top. So that's that curly edge of the cake. So I haven't blended anything at this stage. I'm going to in a minute though. Just want to get a bit more pastel on the page. So you can't blend until there's something there to blend with. All right, so now I've got my dark blue violet over my brown. This was all brown, then a bit of blue violet on the edge here, and then some orange on the top to give it that shiny edge. It's already looking fairly shiny. And now I'm just going to softly, softly push that in. I'm pulling it in little circular motions from this edge in towards the middle of the cake or the slice of cake. Just trying to get that feeling of the shape of the cake as it goes up there. Now, I need a bit more pastel here because there's not enough. When you haven't got enough pastel on there, it just sort of shows the paper through still and you can't sort of cover it. If that's happening, just add some more. Coolio. All right, so I've got mid-brown here, and then the orange has been pushed in, but it's still giving me enough light just to create that little bit of a turn there. Just going to adjust my light so you can see better what I'm doing. It's gone all cloudy now. Lighter. Groovy. All right. The next we've got to do is the icing. So we're going to do that in a creamy color. That's this creamy kind of color. And put that on where we've got the icing. So start rubbing that in. Just filling all of this area in with our creamy color. I know it doesn't look very creamy, but we're going to add some white to get some shine in there. Okay. Then we can rub it in. And if you haven't got enough on there, you have to push more in. That's nice and filled up now. And you can see on that left side, they've got a bit of shadow or brown. I'm throwing a bit of brown in here now because it is quite dark down there on that side. But it's not all smooth. It's kind of got contours in it. There's shadows and lights and things. So I'm just going to throw a bit of brown in there to get a bit of contour going on. And then I can bring my cream back over the top of it to get some shape happening in there. Okay. So now some more cream over the top. See how we're putting this over the top now? It's starting to look nice and lush and thick and yummy. And then pushing that through. So the cream in the cake is a different texture to the cake, isn't it? It's much smoother. So that's why we want to create texture with different colours and rub it in, because if you don't rub it in, it'll keep that mottly sort of bumpy look, which is what we want for the cake, but not necessarily for the cream. So what I'm doing now is I'm just patching a bit of brown around the top of the cream, because there's going to be shadow cast by the bit of cake that sits on top of it. So we're just casting a bit of shadow under there with some of the brown. And I'm going to push that in, and then I can come back again over with my cream. So we're kind of going over things a fair bit today, and that's often what you have to do with pastels, is just repeat, rinse and repeat a lot of the time. Now we've got this sort of dirty, muddy effect going on, and we can come back in now with our cream and get some highlights back in there. Okay, so if you look at your picture, you can see there's a lovely little crease that sort of comes across like this through there, okay, of cream. So I'm going to put a line through there like that, and then blend that in a little bit. And then I can get my, maybe not brown this time, I might go for blue violet, which is quite dark, so don't use too much. But see how that bump of cream is casting a little shadow underneath it? So we need to put a bit of blue violet in there and very softly blur that through. So it's creating a little shadow under that bump. And then we can add more cream over the top to get a lighter, lovely bumpy effects like that. See that? So it's always about the shadows and the lights, isn't it? There's another little dark section just through here. It's got a little shadow through there, and then there's the lighter cream coming out from it. So now I can, got a bit of shadow there, pull it up to where the cake's going to come so it can overlap it, and then pull this cream down around through here and bring that across like that, and start to create, hopefully, a bit of a shadow over a bit of cream that might be poking out there. And also just adding a bit more pastel to get the cream to be lovely and rich down through here and brighter. So as we come around to the right side of the cake, we're going to get brighter because it's lighter around here. Okay, because that's where the light is. I'm going to just redraw my edges. And I don't know if you can see it, but there is some shadow under the cream where it sits on the cake. So if you get your blue violet and just lightly mark in a bit of dark around here. So we're getting some shadow under the cream. Okay, it's casting a shadow onto that bit of cake. I'm just going to pull it out a little bit, softly merge it, blend, 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 softly, softly, just with the edge of your finger, so you're not getting too much in there. Tip off my dust because I'm working flat. Got dust collecting on my board. Just going to tip that off. Now I can grab some white and I can highlight some of these areas of the cream. So the edge here is where it's lightest. And then inside this section here, down through here. So we're just highlighting those really light little areas that are catching the light. And you can see it really clearly in the black and white picture. So if you have that up on a screen near you, it's really quite clear to see the whiter sections. And that's just going to make the cream shine and glow and be lovely and bright. This is a schminky white, so it's very creamy. They're good and bad. Sometimes it doesn't stick enough because they're so creamy, and other times they're really great for doing things like this. So I'm just going to tip my dust off again. And I want to lighten up in here. It's too dark. So, you know, you just got to be really careful with your shadows and things and try not to make it too dirty, because we want this to be delicious. We want someone to want to eat it. They're not going to want to eat it if it looks all dirty. I'm just marking off bit of cream, more cream pastel through here to get some of that lovely texture going on through there. Beautiful. Push it in, make it nice and smooth. There we go. So that'll do for now. We can always come back and touch that up if we need to at the end. We'll move up into the cake again now. So you've got your browns for your cake. Brown and orange I had. I still like the idea of a bit of purple, so I might put that there too. And we can begin to work on the next layer of cake. So let's pop our brown down. This is the shadow side. So this is the edge of the cake we're going to do first. Pull that around over the top of your cream now, because this sits on top of our cream. So pulling my brown around like that, covering up the edges so we've got no cream with gaps between. Pushing in the brown. So once you've got your brown pastel on your page, push it in with your finger, pull it around in the shape of the cake. So we're just going to pull that around like that. And it tapers off to the side up there on the right, that dark edge. Okay, so that's the darkest edge. Pushed in your brown. Now we can put some dark on there. Blue violet, beautiful. Zhoosh a bit of that on there. If you've got the Art Spectrum blue violet, you'll find it's quite soft and crumbly, so you won't need a lot. We're going to get a bit of that on there. I've just pushed it in patches, little sections like that, because I want to try and get the texture of the cake while we're doing this. And now I'm not going to blend it in too hard. I just want to pull it really softly across the surface so that it sticks, but it's not blending too much with the brown. So I'm getting a nice consistency or cakey look. And I'll tip off my dust. Got fingerprints everywhere. So that's a nice dark sort of side for the cake. And then I can put in brown again. This is now the top of the cake, so we're coming up around here. This is my mid brown, my basic brown that I am using for my cake colour. Bringing that all the way around, making sure you get enough pastel down so we can push it in. And we're going to blend that in as well. So merge that with the last layer that we did. So it's kind of merging with the side of the cake because we want to keep them together. Pushing that around there like that. Again, I've got a bit of dust on there, so I have to tip that off. And now my edge of my cake doesn't look that dark anymore because I've put more brown above it. But let's see what happens if we pop a bit of orange in here. So over here, I'll do some orange. See how as I'm rubbing it around, it's sort of picking up the texture of the paper, which is nice because it's got that lovely cakey look. So I'm just putting a bit of orange through there to brighten that up a little bit and get some more light into it. I'll throw a bit of this pink in too, just to see what happens because I like it. Just warms it up, I think. The pink is nice. Yeah. So just warming that up a little bit with my pink. Now, as we go around to the right side over here, we've got, that's where the light is, isn't it? So we've got a shiny bit around there. So let's try it with the pale blue first. So what we're doing is we're going to put this down on top of the brown and just push it like this, just little soft movements like this, because we want to try and retain the texture of the cake. And so by pushing it around like that, hopefully, so far so good, it's going to keep that bumpy kind of texture. Nice. And I want that really bright right around there because that's where the light's coming from. It's really light along there, isn't it? So that was with my
Jeannie,
pale blue. Yes.
just a question. Is your icing coming, is your cake coming right up to the edge of the icing? Your color?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is the icing here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I haven't gone that far up.
Oh, okay. It's a bit confusing because this piece of cake has two sides basically.
Yeah.
So we're doing the dark edge first, which is this bottom part, and then the top section is the top of that slice of cake. And the icing will sit on top of it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool. All right. The other cool color, which I didn't have in here, I've got a bit of blue. I'm going to throw a bit of blue into this dark section too, because I think blue and brown kind of make a really nice dark together. And I want to keep this part fairly dark because it's got to sort of curl up into the top of that cake. Yeah, that's nice. I'll throw a bit of that blue down there too while I've got it in my hand. Cool, cool. So a bit of dark blue, that's the blue I used on the plate, the darker blue, not the pale blue, in through the brown here, and that just gives it a really nice shadow, and that's what we're trying to achieve. So this piece of cake, this is one slice, and then after this slice we're going into the icing. But first we need to get some light, more light over here. This is my white schminky. So I'm going to zhoosh it around on here. Same sort of movement as I did before with the pale blue, because I wanted to retain the texture of the cake. And because it's got little tiny bumps in it, the risen bumps, the rise or the higher bumps are the ones that are going to catch the light, and the little bumps that are underneath will stay brown or dark. So I want to try and make it look like it's got that cakey texture, okay, with those little edges that catch the light. Something like that. So that's coming along quite well. Good, good. All right. I'm just going to jump back down to this other layer first before we move on, and put a bit more orange in there because I just want to lighten up that little bit through there. So always checking. You can, keep checking back to what you did before, and making sure that everything kind of works together. Use similar colors in each or all your sections as well, so that it all ties in together. So that's nice. That's good. So I'm using the colors, the orange and that, just by sort of dabbing it onto the paper like this. This is really soft. Really soft pastels are beautiful because they just hang on. You can do that sort of thing and they just have lovely, lovely texture. Harder ones like this one. Oh yeah, that works too. The blue won't so much because it's really hard. So it just depends on the texture of your pastel as to how they will hang on to the paper. So you can see the blue, it's a really hard pastel. So to get it to do something, I need to push harder, get it to stick a bit more. It's quite scratchy too. It's putting some scratch marks in my paper. So that's not a very nice pastel. That one. The orange is beautiful because it's a soft, really soft. These are called Blue Earth, these little square guys. That's my brown Blue Earth. I really like Blue Earth. They're a beautiful, soft pastel and they're just lovely to use. So they're a really good option. Cool. So that's our cake. It's got its shine on it. I know it looks a bit weird at the moment, but once we finish, it'll all make sense. So we've got our white on there. We've got our icing in there. If you feel like you need to go back and touch up your icing, maybe you want to add a bit more white, brighten it up in a few spots, or add shadows or something, then by all means do that. Excuse me. You can just touch up a couple of areas and get some nice highlights happening through there. There's that particular right side of the icing, not icing, cream that's really bright. It's catching the light. All right, let's move on to the icing now. So the icing takes up a fair chunk of the picture, doesn't it? All of this here is icing. So we have like a row of icing all through there, and then we've got our cherries on top. So I'm going to do the icing in the same color as I did my cake. But what we need to do first is add a little bit of dark with your blue violet just under where the icing is going to be, because there is a little bit of a shadow as it falls down onto the cake. So just put a little row of dark blue violet around that area there, and then pull it up into the icing area so that it's not going to dirty or darken your cake too much. But we just need to get that in there because that's going to be some of the shadow on the icing. All right, now the icing has lots of sort of layers and contours through it. So let's fill in all the icing area with brown. Now this is the brown I've been using for the cake. It's just the basic brown. I'm going to try and leave some of those white sections that we marked in earlier uncovered, because that means they'll be really white and they'll be on, on paper without anything underneath them. Sometimes if you have color underneath things, it can it does, it always picks up whatever's underneath it, which is a blessing and a curse. Sometimes you want it and sometimes you don't. So when you don't and you want to get the white as white as you can, try to not put too much color or anything else underneath where the white's going to go. Just sort of left a bit of a gap over on that right side. I can patch it up later. I just want to make sure I leave enough space for my white. Now we've got this lovely little curve here, haven't we? So this comes around to there like that. There's a curve there. I'm just drawing it back in so I can find it again. I'm going to put pale blue where I can see light. So there's a bit of blue there. It sticks much better when there's nothing under it. A little bit of light over here. There's a bit down here. I know we don't normally put light in at this stage, but I just need to mark out those spots where there's light. Got some light there, and then we've got light here. Okay, it's just blocking in basically. Because it's really light over there, and I want to make sure it stays nice and light. All right, so we've got that put in. Let's push in this brown now. I'm going to push that into the paper. So we can start making our icing. Come all the way down to the edge there where we put the shadow, the dark blue violet or dark, whatever you're using for the shadow. Pushing in the brown around here. And then just pushing it in between those white sections if you can. Sort of, it's a bit messy, but that's okay. We'll come and fix that up. All right, so now we've got to study this icing, and that side of it is dark. Can you, much like the cake, the sides of the cake, it's got volume and it needs to be darker around through here to get it to lift up. And there's also a darker section around in there. It's like another level of icing building on top of that bottom part. So we're just trying to create this sort of dark shadow area. I'm just going to throw some of this up here as well on that left side where the cherries are, because it's quite dark in there and we can't see anything much that's going on. And there's some dark under here on this section here. So this is where you get the wow factor, because you've got your light against your dark. Okay, so that's what makes things sing, when you have light next to dark. So you can't be afraid of the dark. So just putting in some dark where I can see darker areas, and that is in these little creases on the side here. So at the top of that rectangular light section on the left, we've got a little bit of dark there. There's a few little bumps and humps over there on the right side on that far bump. And then on the bottom side of the icing, as it kind of curls up, it's darker around through there. We've got a little crease coming through there. So that's a nice little dark bit, and another crease there. There's a crease through there. And it's sort of dark around where the cherries are too. So make sure you get some shadow and dark in around there. I'm going to put some blue into my dark as well, because I like what that does. If you don't like it, you don't have to do it. I just think it's quite nice. Okay. So now I'm going to push this in, and I'm going to push it in the direction that the icing's rolling in. So this edge that's darker sort of looks like it's rolling. So I'm going to pull it up from the edge into the icing, so it gets that nice sort of gentle merge from dark to mid. And then I'm just going to push this around. This area is dark up here. We've got a big dark shadow through there. Dark up under your cherries. Side of the cake at the top left, we've got some darkness in there, so make that nice and dark. And then there's a bit over here. Hard not getting the darks mixed up with the lights, but at least if you've got a bit of light down first, it's a good base coat to sort of support the extra light that we're going to put on top of it. It's just nice to give it that bit of foundation to work with. Okay, so now I'm going to push I tip my dust off. Not push it, tip it. I'm going to throw a bit of this red into here too, pinky colour. So you can see quite a lot of pink in there, and that'll tie in really nicely with the cherries. Get some of that in there. Good. So tipping off dust again. Then I'm going to come back over it now with my brown that I started with. So this, I want to sort of emphasize now some of the creases and folds and things that are in the icing. Don't know if it's too dark or not. It might be a bit too dark to make that happen, make that work. Here it is. So try this lighter brown. This has got a bit of red in it. It's a bit of a lighter tone, so that might be helpful just to create a little bit more contrast in my tones. So we'll push some of that in a minute. Getting some shapes and things happening. Looking for the light. I'm just working my way around this icing, looking for the lighter brown colours. Not necessarily the mid brown, but the lighter sort of tones. Not the whitest either. Now I'm just going to push all this in softly, softly. to try and create this lovely smooth sort of icing. There we go. Pulling it across that way. Getting there, tipping off dust. I feel like I want to put black in there. It's just not got enough punch for me. I'm going to grab a bit of black, I think. Just think black might give it a bit more drama. You know me, I love drama in my art, not in my life, only in my art. Okay, so that's coming. Oh yeah, that's better, isn't it? A bit more drama, a bit darker. What we need. Video. Yeah, look at that. And the creases there. Some lovely little creases that are nice if you can catch those with a bit of darkness. Sometimes the blue violets are beautiful dark, but sometimes not quite dark enough, especially when you're working with colours that are similar tones. They all start to merge together and they don't kind of pop anymore. So that's why I saved black for last as well. It's much like saving the white for last. Try everything else first, and if it doesn't work, then you've still got dark black or something similar to go to. So I like doing that. It's good. And sometimes you discover, you know, darks that you might not have thought about before, like dark blue is really beautiful instead of black in a lot of cases. Anyway, I think this is working well. Bring a bit of black up through here. And a little bit up through the cherries as well. Around there. That's better. Bit more drama. We like drama in our art. Okay, good. Now I'm going to just pick up my white again now and put some more white back in. Just got to fix up this edge here. Oh, that was a white bit that I just covered up. Oh, well, never mind. A bit of icing up through there. I just want to get the browns nice and rich. Tip off my dust again. And then I'm going to come back over this now, these light sections with my pale blue. Saving the white for last if I need it. Because this light is sort of all broken up in little segments too. It's not one big patch of light. There's little interesting little shapes of light. So they're not all the same. We want to try and keep them looking natural. Yeah, it's not going over the brown as nicely as I'd like. So I'm glad I whited or lightened some of that before, because now I can get the light back in, which is really good. Bring that down through there. Do soft little sweepy sort of shapes, you know, like that, to get the roundness of that curvy bit happening in there. So I've got a hard pastel, I've got a soft pastel. It's got a hard edge on it, this one. It's round, but it's got a really hard, sharp edge. So I can actually pull it, put it down here and pull it across like that. And as I lift up, it gives me that lovely soft edge on the left to make that mark a little bit softer. And there's another little curly bit through here. Got a little edge on it there. And another tiny bit over there. So there's lots of small areas that have a bit of light on them that you can kind of wander around the picture with your pastel and just touch it on different spots where you can see little shiny bits. Don't overdo it though. You've got to try and keep it fairly minimal because more is less. Cool, cool. I'm just going to come over here and zhoosh that up through there a little bit more. Okay, now tipping off my dust. Next, we're going to get stuck into the cherries. So, like we talked about earlier, we're going to do the cherries from back to front, okay? So that means working out where they are in the picture and what order to do them in. So we need to go from back to front. So we've got a little bundle back here on the left. Then we've got a lovely big one right in the middle and another big one in front of that. So there's two in there. And then we've got these two little guys at the back. And then we've got that one, that one, that one, and that one. So that's kind of the order we need to work it in. So let's start with the back area on the left. I'm going to use my dark pink to just block in some of the colours of the cherries. So I know they're not this bright, but I'm going to quieten them down with more dark, but I just want to get this beautiful light in there first. Okay, so that's that guy and that one behind. And then if I pick up my blue violet, I can put some dark down here. So what I want to do is create dark between them so that I can then differentiate them between each other so they're not all the one colour. So when you're doing stuff like this, that you have something that's all the one colour or a similar colour, you've got to find ways of making them stand on top of each other. And it's a similar process with flowers. If you're doing petals and they're all the same colour, you've got to figure out how to get something to sit in front of the other if it's the same colour. And that's all about tone, isn't it? It's about how dark or light it is. So it's really important to have some knowledge about tone and understand how it works, because it will be vital for helping you put your colours into things like this. Okay, so that's one strawberry at the back there. He needs to be darker on the right-hand side. Remember, everything on the right is dark, and everything on the left is either coloured or catching the light. So he's dark because I need this one in front of him to be a bit lighter. So just got to always think about what's coming next and how can I make it pop. Then we've got this big guy up the back here. Okay, so we can only see a bit of that one. He's quite dark and he's got a little bit of a very soft pinkish glow on his right shoulder. So that will be between this one and that one. Okay, and this one has a lot of dark through here. So that's why this guy needs to be a little bit pinker on that side there. So this guy sits in front of it and we can see that with our blue violet. So he's quite dark on the right side there. And then if I put my pink in here on the, on the right, he's dark on the left. Not very good at lefts and rights today. Then that's that colour, and then I can kind of push that around as well. So trying to make the colours mix together nicely, gently, gently. Okay, cool. So that's that guy. Then we can do these two guys behind there. So this one has a beautiful pinkish colour on the right side. And then he gets darker as it goes to the left. So we're darker in here. And I'll just merge those gently so they merge in together, those beautiful colours. So everything has a similar process, doesn't it? that we're doing here. There's a little bright cherry popping in here, just in between these little fellas. It's just a triangle of cherry just there. And it's nice and bright. I'm going to pick up my lighter pink now and just highlight that a little bit. That's nice. And then I can just softly blend that in. He's got a little shine, nice little shine on it. Down inside here is quite dark. And remember, this cherry on the far right is sitting in the icing, so it's got a nice straight sort of bottom on it. And then it's got this beautiful purpley coloured edge on the right. And a big white shiny bit that I'm going to try and leave unpainted so I can get my white to glow on that one. Just in there. There we go. Good, good. Just quieten that one down a tiny bit. All right. Now, before we go much further, I want to add the lights onto the ones we've done so far. So I'm just going to tip off this dust. Very dusty today. Okay. Now let's put a bit of shine on these guys, because I think that's what keeps us motivated, isn't it? Is the shine. Pick up your white. And I'm just going to put a shine on this guy over here. So he's got a little triangle of shine just there. This is my schminky white. They're very creamy. This guy has a nice little smidge of white about there. This tiny triangle of a cherry has a little bit of white through there. This one has a dash of white. Sometimes, and don't blend your white. If you put your fingers into your white, it's going to go pink or dull. This one, where I left a gap for the white, it's going to be really nice and clean and bright. Beautiful. Lots of dust from my white, so I'll tip off that. Lovely. And then I can come back in now and tidy up my white sections if I need to. Anyway, I'll leave that as it is for now, because we're going to move on and do more cherries as we work our way forward. Okay, I'm just sipping tea here. All right, so we've got a little bit of dark back through here again too. So just darken up. Just check your darks now. Just run around, check your darks, make sure that, you know, if there's a cherry in front of another one, how are we going to differentiate it? Is there enough dark behind it to let the light pop, or vice versa? So just double check that you've got enough darks in all the right places. Okay, now this guy comes down low and it's very dark in there, so I'm just going to darken that off in there behind our little triangle cherry. Make that nice and dark through there. And it's also dark down in here. So in between the cherries now, we're looking for the darks. So this one is dark in there like that. And then I can come back over with that with my beautiful pinks. And brighten that up. So this one has a lovely bit of light right around it. Around the part where the little stem is. So I'm going to just lighten up around there. I'm going to try and leave some of that unpainted so I can get the white in to be shiny. See how we go. We'll try. Bit hard with pastels, isn't it, when you want to leave a small space? Because they're so chunky, they tend not to like doing fine work. That doesn't mean it's impossible. It just takes some practice. So I'm just pushing that in like that. And then this one's got a little stem on it. You could darken off in towards the stem there, just a tad. And see the light on that one. The light on that will come across here. So that's the section in front of the stem. And I'm putting the light in now because I can. And it comes down to there. And across like that. It's very bright, isn't it? It's so white. Love it. And then I can put my stem in. So the stem comes up here like this and then down into there. And we can't see where it joins the cherry because it's down behind the little lip of the edge there, which was what I was getting at when I was putting my white there. I'm just going to touch that up a tad and make that probably a bit lighter through there. Pop a bit of my bright pink in here. Remember, we've got this beautiful bright pink, so I'll try and remember to use that because it just adds some lovely light, highlights everything. That's nice. And then I just soften that edges of that off a little bit. So my white is very crumbly. And very white. Maybe that's a bit too bright. So I'm just going to dab it softly. If something's too light or too bright, you can just give it a little dab with your finger and it'll dull it down a tad. Just working on this guy, making it a bit pinker. Dipping off my dust. So annoying with this dust. And I'm just going to grab a bit of charcoal and clean up around this area here. So charcoal is really good if you just want to get something small in there and darken off a little bit without going too dark. It's a really good option just to get some of your finer work in there. So I think that's a bit better. And also my stem has a shadow on the left side. So I'm just going to pull my charcoal down like that on the stem and see how it's given me a nice little bit of a shadow effect through there. So I quite like what's happened to that. And it's got a little light tip on it. And if we can get a tip on there, let's see. Might try this white pencil. Might be too white. Oh, it's not too bad. And that can come down into here because it's also got a light side, which is the green. And I just want to use my pencil in here and just get this to sit in front. Something like that. Coolio. All right, and a bit more dark just for fun. So that's that fella. That little cherry. Make him a bit fatter. His hole's quite big, isn't it? Maybe it needs to be a bit smaller. It looks bigger to me anyway from here. Anyway, that'll be fine. We'll move on. So let's go over here to the far left and work on these guys. So we've got this one here up the back, which has that little lovely shine. Then we've got another one that sits down here in front of it, and it's a little bit lighter. We can see a nice light side of it there. And then it goes dark again as it gets down into the icing. And on both the left and the right, it's darker. So we can put a dark section through here. It's like an oval shape, really, down through there. And then across and underneath it, sort of comes across that way. This nice oval dark shape through there. And then just pushing some of that up into the pinks. So we're getting a nice blend of the two. But we want to keep the top of it lighter with the pinks so we can see it against the one that it's behind. So I'm just going to lighten that up a tiny bit more with this other pink, just to give it a bit of life. Yeah. And then it's got this very tiny little circle here, which is too far out. Put it back inside there. So that'll be where the stem's coming from. This stem isn't as green as the other one because it's in shadow. So I'm going to put it in as green, and then I might go over it with some charcoal and something else and see what we can make happen. If I try some of this lighter brown. Still a bit bright, I think. I can shush that up a bit and then get my charcoal and darken that off. So it's actually darker where it comes out of the cherry and gets lighter towards the edge, doesn't it? So I think something like that looks okay. Yeah, that'll do. That'll do the trick. And then there's a little bit of white on this guy too. Probably should be using my pale blue, but anyway, a little bit of white just here. So again, I'm just touching that on, and I'm not going to blend it in because it'll just turn to mud. That looks all right, so I'll leave that as is. Now what's happening, there's another big one here, and it's casting a shadow onto the guy we just did. So if you look at that one, you can see there's a dark section there. And that's a dark shadow from this one next to it. I'm going to make it black just so I can see it properly. So there's a shadow there, and that's being cast by this big guy in the middle. Oh, the black's nice, isn't it? That creates a bit more drama and interest. I like it. Might have to put more black in there now. While I've got it in my hand, I'll go back over here and throw some black in. Nice. Gently push that in so it's not too strong. Just want to make it a little bit more drama with my darks, so it's nice. Yeah. Good. Okay. Back to this guy. So he's casting a shadow on there, and the top of this one is lighter. So it's quite light on the top and on the left, and then as it goes down, it gets darker. So much darker in through here. I'm going to grab my black again. Lovely and dark through there. And that kind of merges into that one we just did. So there's all these lost edges that sort of disappear inside each other. I'm going to push that in. Make it nice and rich and dark. Beautiful. Ooh, the black's delicious, isn't it? Maybe I should stop avoiding it all the time and use it a bit more often. Then you can overdo these things. But anyway, so that's nice. Now, what else is this fellow on? He's got a nice shine. I'm going to do that with blue first. So he's got a lovely shine right on the edge here. Comes down to that guy. And then it comes up to the top and has this little shape at the top of there, and then around down like that. And then inside there, it's a little bit darker through there. So just got to stop picking up black now. Make that blue violet dark through there. And then a bit more pink. There. And then it also has a little area where the stem was. It's like a circle, little circle there. Just going to blur that off a bit. It's too strong. And I'm going to get my charcoal and just sort of darken around it a little bit to create a bit of a hole. Like that. Yeah, okay. Goodie-o. And now we can do this last one that's here in the front. So it's very dark, isn't it? Down here on the left side, it's very dark. And then it's got this beautiful big shoulder that comes across like this around there. And I can fill in the right side with that beautiful pinky colour. And then I'm going to use my blue violet and do the dark side, but I might add some black as well. See how we go. I think I definitely need black in there. So blue violet that sort of bleeds off into this lovely pinky colour. Lots of dust. And then some black. Delicious black through there. Into here. Because that's another lost edge that's sort of disappearing off into the cake, into the icing. Softly, softly. A lot of this dust just won't blend in. You've got to tip it off because it won't go away. It's very annoying. Okay, tipping it off. There we are. And I'll just tidy up in here, get rid of my little fingerprints. So that's nice. That's good. And then I can add a shine onto this guy. So I might do that one in white because it's quite dramatic, this one here. Let's do a nice big white shine there. Oh, it's very white, isn't it? So shiny. Lovely. And he has a stem coming out of this section here. So I'm going to draw a green line. It's going to go up to there, like that. And then I can get my charcoal, or if you have a small piece of dark pastel, or even a pastel pencil that's dark, you can use that to get a little shadow just on the left-hand side of the stem. So we want to kind of quieten it down a bit and make it a slightly shadowy effect on that left side. Okay. There is another little stem up there. I don't know if you want to put that one in or not. I guess we could. Should probably put a few in. There's one there. There's another one up there. There's a little one over there. So we can dull those down a little bit because this one in the back here is a bit further away and not quite as bright. Where's my charcoal? So we can quieten this one down a tad. I'm just going to sort of blend it with my charcoal with the brown and the green colour. This one over here is fairly bright, so he can stay like that. Maybe he needs to be a tad brighter. Oops, now he's too fat. So then I can just use the charcoal to make it sort of go off into the distance a little bit. And this guy over here on the far left, that can be just a soft little suggestion of a stem too. All right, I think we're just about there. I feel like I'm coming down with a cold. Anyway, so let's put a little bit, I just want to get more dark in here now because the black got me excited. So I'm going to zhoosh up a bit of the edge of this. bit more. Some more dark through there. Bit more dark around the base of the icing as well, because it's got this beautiful folded sort of feeling through it. And up around here. And there's also lots of beautiful purples and reds through there too, so we can put a bit of that in. Yeah, nice. And put a bit of that down in here too. Just to warm it up a tad. Okay, it's hard to look at when you haven't got the whole thing filled in. Let's see if this makes a difference. I'll just tape it off to there. No, it's not really. Don't waste the tape. So that's our cake. And I think it's quite lovely, really. Pretty happy with that. The icing could maybe be a little bit clean now that I've been tipping all my dust off. It's landed in the icing, so now it's all dirty. So when that happens, you can just come back with your pastel and just go over it again. I'll clean it all up. It is annoying, which is another reason when you are painting something to start at the top and work down, because if you work down and the pastel catches on the paper, as you come down, you sort of start to just, push it in anyway. So, yeah, that's the trouble with pastels, is all the dust that you manage to create. I'm just putting some of that cream from my cream onto my cake, just on that little edge there to get some light back in. It's nice. Cool. All right, so I think we're done. I think we've finished our beautiful Black Forest cherry cake. And I look forward to seeing your photos. So I really would love to see what you've done. Don't be afraid to share them. And I like to put them into my newsletter so everyone can see everyone else's paintings. We don't put names on them. So if you don't want to, if you feel reluctant, then don't worry, because you are not identified. If you feel proud, then put your name on the damn painting, because that's usually what you do, isn't it? Sign your paintings. So we shall leave that there for today. Thank you once again for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed our class today, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you. See you soon. Bye.